we're just going to do our best.
My plan when I began filming this documentary 6 years ago was to make a supportive film about a church minister from West Virginia who helps people commit suicide. I had no idea what I'd find out about George Exoo and his world.
If you can't trust a priest, who can you trust? So we may be the first martyrs.
Right! Can't I answer this question enough? I'm not going to answer this anymore! I am not going to answer that question anymore! I can't take any more of this!
He's a stupid man, in my opinion.
I know it's bitter. Just keep drinking. Put your finger over your nose if you have to, and get it all down.
Was I playing with myself while I was doing this?
I don't want to film you dying, George.
It's absolute bullshit. So now what? Do you want me to cry? Should I cry for you?
He's not just staring into the abyss, he's in serious danger of falling into it.
I think it's the reason I'm placed on this planet.
This story begins in January 2002. A woman's body has been found in this rented house in Dublin. Her name is Rosemary Toole, and police say she was suffering from depression.
Her death does appear to have been a case of assisted suicide. Gardaí are now investigating not only how the woman died, but whether or not someone was with her at the time. Any person convicted of helping her to commit suicide could be jailed for up to 14 years.
A few weeks later, and the Irish police release a suspect's name. They're seeking the arrest of the Reverend George Exoo from Beckley, West Virginia. I've always supported the Right to Die movement, and so I call him and ask if I can film him. He says he was in the room with Rosemary Toole when she died. He says he's happy to come out from his shadowy world and be filmed by me, because he wants his work documented before he's arrested and it's too late. I ask him what suicide method he uses, and he says helium. Are you struck by the irony that here is a box with a young
smiling child full of great color, and we're bringing the same color and happiness to people as that child is experiencing with those balloons? You know, when somebody looks at you and just before they go out and they say thank you, they're not mad at the world, they're grateful, they're happy.
This is George's friend, Susan. She doesn't want her face shown. George offers to demonstrate the helium method for me. I can't show the technical aspects of it.
Now, what we're going to do is turn on the helium.
Don't turn it off.
What?
It just popped and hit me in the stomach.
What popped?
This.
Well, I don't know how it did that.
It's like it's another way of killing people, just give them a heart attack.
Yeah, you just give them a heart attack. Well, there's nothing we can do.
When you're helping people.
This never happened. This never happened before.
Helium is one of George's preferred methods because of its lethality. Death occurs within 3 to 5 minutes, although if the suicide is somehow fumbled, they'll probably end up in a permanent vegetative state. Who is George Exoo? What is this world he belongs to? It turns out that the modern assisted suicide movement began in 1975 in Malmesbury, Wiltshire, with a woman called Humphrey, who was suffering from terminal cancer.
She asked me to help her to die. And I said, what do you want me to do? She said, go to a doctor and get an overdose of drugs. And at a point in March 1975, she did take those drugs in my presence and died. I wrote a little book about it, and that kick-started the Right to Die movement. Jean's Way was published in 1978, and to my amazement, caused a sensation. People kept coming to me and saying, how do you do it? Where do you get the drugs? What drugs do you use? Hundreds of people.
In the end, a network of dozens of Right to Die groups formed in the wake of Jean's Way. They were set up to lobby for a change in the law and provide the names of doctors willing to offer lethal doses to terminally ill people.
The ambience of what I'm talking is severe, terminal and hopeless illness.
Derek says that on the edge of the Right to Die movement is a man who's willing to help non-terminally ill people kill themselves. George Exoo.
Once or twice a week I get very strange people on the telephone, and they're anxious to commit suicide because of their depression or sad life or something. When you get one of these people gets onto you and your number, they want to talk, and they call again, and they call leave messages, and they pursue you. And they also call all the other Right to Die groups. And they would say, oh, we can't help you, it's not within our parameters, but George Exoo will probably help you. See, and that gets them off the phone and onto George's line.
Isn't that kind of terrible in a way?
Oh, yes.
I think it's a kind of under the counter, yeah. I mean,
So
I will get calls from people who say, well, I asked these people and they wouldn't help me, but they gave me your name. Well,
how many people have you assisted?
actually, I now know. I calculated it out. I have done hands-on assisting with 82 people, and another 20 have relied on my help with at a distance.
Hands-on assisting?
Hands-on assistance. That means I was there. I was present with them when they died.
It's only legal in the Netherlands, Belgium, and Switzerland, and Oregon. The law all over the Western world is very tolerant towards assisted suicide of dying people and hopelessly degenerative ill people. And they usually will not prosecute. I mean, in my case, I mean, when the police came to me, I said, yes, I did it. I'm guilty. You know, absolutely. But when it comes to mentally ill people, that's where the police will pounce.
Hello, is this Pam? Sounds like her. Listen, I would like to come to visit you tomorrow, if possible, to just do a little spiritual groundwork. Would that be possible? Mm-hmm. Oh, bless your heart. Okay. Hey, we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks so much. Bye-bye. So here are our instructions. And I would say if we're to be there by noon, we want to leave about 6:30 in the morning. Is that too early?
Today, George is driving 6 hours to visit Pam, who says she's suffering from the non-terminal chronic fatigue syndrome and is considering killing herself.
Some of my other colleagues who do this will avoid such persons like the plague.
George is paying for the petrol, even though he's broke. He says he doesn't accept payment, only expenses, because it's his calling. He says he feels an affinity with Mother Teresa, who also helped people nobody else would.
I think it's the reason I'm placed on this planet, and I hope that in 25 or 50 years there will be a lot of George Exoos doing this kind of work as a specialized ministry, and a midwife to the dying, but people who want to hasten their death. I think it's the same thing that impelled Mother Teresa to India. Do you have your cell phone with you? Yeah. Let's try dialing this number. It's ringing in the house. I'm at your front door. All right, we'll see you shortly. Bye-bye. How do you do?
Hi, come on in.
I'm George.
Hi, George.
Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And this is David, and behind him is John.
I'm John.
I thought this was just to be a pastoral visit. I didn't realise that George was about to eulogise to Pam on the joys of death and what a great adventure it will be.
This is a great adventure. Look forward to it.
I'm following a church minister who helps non-terminally ill people kill themselves and is wanted by the Irish police.
How many horses do you have?
We're at the house of a prospective client, Pam, who's thinking about committing suicide.
Tell me a little bit about your illness.
This is a difficult disease to cope with because people, you know, they run all the tests come back negative, and then they decide that you're all in your head,
Yeah.
you know, and start sending you to, wanting you to go to psychiatrists, and of course that was totally useless, and
Sure.
I knew it.
So this drains your energy,
well, I mean, it's more akin to total exhaustion.
Yeah, and you have constant pain?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pam seems pleased to have someone there who doesn't question her symptoms at all. I'm a bit surprised at how unquestioning George is, but I don't say anything.
I've learned what I can from this. You know, I don't judge much of anybody for anything. Because until you've walked in somebody else's shoes, you do not know.
It's, you know, what is so difficult are the people who just sit in judgment. You know, they've got some theory, they've got some theology, they read some damn book someplace, and they decide they know how you have to suffer, you know, because they got this theory that says God wants people to suffer, or even on the cross, Jesus, you know. I mean, that crucifix is hung in Catholic hospitals in every room so that people know they got to suffer just like Jesus suffered. You know what the mechanics of the dying will be. Okay, so and you have some sleeping pills.
Mm-hmm.
You have that, and you have a helium tank.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you need. And I'd like to leave with you. I cry every time I see the tape. It's a very nice treatment. It talks about, you know, people leaving their bodies.
George says he gives all his clients the documentary Life After Life, in which 6 people describe their near-death experiences. He says he watches it repeatedly himself because it makes death seem like a great adventure.
Doctors did anything they could to help me, but I was declared dead.
I realized I was out of my body when I was suddenly looking at this light.
Out of that light stepped the most amazing being I have ever been in the presence of.
All right, this has been a great interview. Thank you.
Wow.
God bless you.
Well. Ciao.
Ciao.
So what's next with Pam?
Well, she doesn't have a date set. She had a date set. She changed the date, and we may go through more of those things. But my guess is before the winter comes, I will be up here.
Does it make you sad? Does it make you depressed, or are you used to it?
Oh, God, I don't know. You know, typically what happens is that I will be strong when I'm there, and I'll come out and I'll start crying. You know, and I feel the pain of these people.
It's now been 2 years since George and his partner Thomas McGurran flew to Ireland to help a woman called Rosemary Toole commit suicide. She'd been suffering from depression. Now the Irish police seem to be closing in on them.
Gardaí believe the woman was not alone when she died in this house, and there's no doubt detectives will travel to the US to try to interview the Reverend Exoo and his companion Thomas McGurran. But the West Virginian preacher says he'll consult his lawyers in Washington before talking to them. Gardaí say they will be sending a file on this case to the Director of Public Prosecutions, and it will be up to him to decide whether or not to seek the 2 men's extradition back to Ireland to face criminal charges.
George telephones. He says he has something he wants to tell me, and can I meet him in the lobby of a hotel in Seattle Airport. It's all quite cloak and dagger.
I've ordered a magic potion for myself and for Thomas in case we need to use it, because I certainly don't intend to travel to Dublin. So we may be the first martyrs.
I hope not.
Well, I hope not too, because I think I have a lot yet to do in a number of areas. But if that's the way it happens, that's the way it happens. I mean, the alternative is to send me over to Ireland for a trial and put me in prison for 14 years in an Irish jail. I mean, this is not doing me any favors.
What would the charge be?
I get assisting with a suicide or something like that. You know, I think we're quite we had a very clear case with this woman. She had 450 pills, 4 big tanks of helium, and she was very cooperative. So maybe we should call you over to Beckley for the big event here.
Really? I really don't. Well, I don't want to film you dying, George.
Well, you know, if it happens, it happens.
I think George really does want me to come over and film his suicide. George is in Seattle for a private meeting of Right to Die activists from around the world.
Do the people here at this hotel know the details of what this conference is, or does the society tend to keep their presence secret?
It's generally very hush-hush. I'm surprised they let you in, to tell you the truth. I think I was placed on this earth for a purpose. I'd like to read a little bit of a quotation. Listen close to your meditations. Don't you feel the Christ in you? Haven't you stretched
Most here are doctors like Peter Admiral, a pioneering Dutch advocate of euthanasia. These Right to Die advocates seem to regard George with benevolent affection or curiosity, and some don't seem to like him at all.
Stretched out your arms in willing crucifixion? Haven't you felt the karmic resonances, the ripples in the spirit field? Haven't you heard the faint echoes of the great vows reverberating?
George has decided to use this conference to announce his intention to kill himself and become the first Right to Die martyr, rather than face extradition.
I did place an order for sufficient substance for Thomas and me to end our lives. It is my intention that I don't intend to go to Ireland.
I think George was expecting an outpouring of shock and sympathy, but really the people here are more interested in what method he's intending to use.
My curiosity is, why would you go with a drug approach as opposed to the other range of methods that you're aware of and that you have experience with?
I know that the drug approach is 100% safe and will work, and I don't want to involve anybody else in my own passing. Yes.
George tells the meeting that the big problem with helium is that in the moments before death, the person killing themselves might try to inadvertently remove the apparatus. Does this mean that George does more than just sit there? Will he actually hold the apparatus in place?
This has not happened, I have to tell you. So what has happened is that there may be some slight movement of the hands coming up. And in that case, we'll just hold their hands. This is after they've already passed out. They won't do this before they passed out, but in the first couple minutes after they passed out, in 20% of the cases, maybe, there may be some action.
Back at the Seattle meeting, George changes the subject. He says Rosemary in Dublin had promised to send him a message from beyond the grave. The message would somehow take the form of roses, and she fulfilled the promise the day after she died.
What happened was Thomas and I flew out the next morning to Amsterdam, and that following night, this would have been about 24 hours exactly after the event, a man brushed by us on the street. He had roses flung over his shoulder. I've never seen anybody with so many. There must have been like 10 dozen roses, at least, over his shoulder, and he brushed by and hit us as he went by. And Thomas said, there she is, you know.
So, dear George, to meet somebody with roses in the Netherlands is not so extreme, because we are ready them to export them to the whole world. Apart from that, you went there, and she wanted that you was there. Okay, I can understand that. Did you help her? That's the question, of course.
We practiced.
It's a very, very easy fact to me that you will be prosecuted because you did something what's not allowed in Ireland, and what's not allowed in the Netherlands, and what's not allowed all over the world. And now you are in troubles. Maybe God can help you.
Well, maybe so.
It is his task as a reverend to help people. Well, of course, that's a good idea. The difference is that I'm a doctor and he is a layman, a reverend, and that, for instance, in the Netherlands, euthanasia only can be done by doctors, because they can control what's going on, they can control the diagnosis, they know what the alternatives are, and he cannot know.
I think I did a very kind, compassionate, loving thing for this woman, as I feel I've done for everybody I've helped. And maybe Dr. Admiral doesn't feel that way, but I do.
Well, of course, I support you emotionally, so don't say that I don't support or don't understand you. I only don't understand why you went to Ireland with these laws. What I know from Ireland is that every Wednesday you will have whiskey over there in prison, so... He's a stupid man, in my opinion. He's too good for this world. And there is another aspect.
Dr. Admiral says he doesn't want us to use this part, but then later he changes his mind and says we can.
In my opinion, I've observing him now for a long time, and I have asked our psychiatrist to observe him. He is, in my opinion, enjoying the death of another one. And that's a dangerous situation in his mind. And I have the strong impression all these years that he wants to be there. He wants to see something dying. Well, he cannot help that. It's his character. It's a kind of phobia to enjoy death. And that's why he says, I will commit suicide, because he wants to die then at that moment. He's not afraid for dying.
Later, Dr. Admiral says he doesn't mean George derives psychopathic pleasure from being around death. Instead, he thinks George is too in love with the afterlife. He believes in it too much, and the pleasure he gets is from clapping and cheering his clients to this better place. I hope the doctor was being over-dramatic when he said George enjoys being around death, because back at Pam's house, I'd let him use my mobile phone to call her, which suddenly seems a bit aiding and abetting to me. I'm beginning to panic.
Do you have your cell phone with you? Let's try dialing this number. I'm at your front door. All right, we'll see you shortly. Bye-bye.
This is George's day job. He's a Unitarian pastor in Beckley, West Virginia. He doesn't have much of a congregation. It's not his fault. Beckley is a conservative town, and Unitarians are so liberal they allow openly gay pastors like George. He says his suicide work is far more important to him than his congregation.
I don't think I've done anything as important as this in my ministry. I think it's the reason I'm placed on this planet.
Now the Irish police have made good on their promise. They formally instigated extradition proceedings against him. They've asked the FBI to arrest him.
The Reverend George Exoo and his assistant Thomas McGurran arrived at the federal courthouse in Beckley on foot of a subpoena. At today's hearing requested by the Irish authorities, both Exoo and McGurran decided to remain silent.
Back home, and George's partner Thomas offers to show me the bottle of poison they've got hidden in their fridge.
Looks like a bottle of water. What if someone comes into the house and wants some water?
It hasn't happened. This is a bottle of some Legend Airlines bottle. Do you want to taste it?
When I die?
No, it has a terrible taste, so...
How much of that would you have to drink?
The whole bottle.
And then you die?
Yeah, if you can keep it down. I can't get it top off. Oh, well, you don't really want to taste it.
I can't open it. If the FBI come and you rush into the kitchen to drink it...
That was the idea.
Well, you'll never get it open.
I didn't realize that.
Many times during my months with George and Thomas, they've seemed invigorated about the idea of death. How did they get this way? Where will it end? George Exoo is a church minister who helps non-terminally ill people commit suicide. I've noticed that George often seems invigorated by the idea of death, especially after watching the documentary Life After Life, in which people describe their near-death experiences. He gives it to all his clients.
I was talking on the phone, holding the telephone like this. The lightning came down the phone line, entered my neck. Then all of a sudden I heard this statement, "He's gone, he's gone." And it was the paramedic making that statement to the driver. I could see a tunnel. Then I began to whisk down it. And I was happy, truly happy, to be away from that body.
It gives people something to look forward to. You are going to have a great adventure. I can't tell you what everything is that's waiting for you, but these are some clues we've gotten from people who have died and come back, and this is what has been reported, and this is a great adventure. Look forward to it.
Life After Life is a big part of George's ministry. My guess is that some of his clients must feel more excited about killing themselves after watching it, so I decide to meet one of the people in it. DANNION Brinkley says he was dead for 28 minutes after being struck by lightning here in Aiken, South Carolina. He says he went to a cathedral of light and met angels, and then he woke up in the hospital morgue. I have an appointment to see DANNION, but first I meet a local journalist, LANGLEY, who was with him the day after he was struck by lightning.
In September of '75, I got a call and said that Danny Brinkley said he'd been hit by lightning. I went down to visit with him, and he said he was dead for 5 minutes, you know.
Well, now he says 28 minutes.
28 minutes? Good for him. That's all I got to say about that.
He says he woke up in the morgue.
Woke up in the morgue? I never heard that story.
Carl says the Augusta Library should have a copy of the article he wrote the day after DANNION was hit by lightning. It should prove whether DANNION has exaggerated over the years the number of minutes he was dead from 5 to 28.
Phone call almost cost him his life.
Have you found it?
Right there, that's his wife, that's him right there. Frantically, Mrs. Brinkley began pounding away on her husband's chest. I was out for a few minutes and she saved my life, Danny said, in the story.
So who saved DANNION's life?
His wife, according to what he said.
Not the paramedic or the morgue attendant?
No, he was conscious when he left the trailer.
This is Dr. Eaves, DANNION's doctor. He says he was with DANNION within an hour of him being struck by lightning, and he seemed fine.
When I saw him, he was completely lucid, and of course, since then, I've heard other stories that I read in the paper about him being pronounced dead, and they'd pulled a sheet over him. No, that's not true.
Did he mention anything to you about going into a light and seeing a cathedral and meeting God?
The only time I knew about that was when I read about it in the newspaper later. A book he wrote. He wrote a book, you know. And he sold right good been down locally, I think, but I didn't buy one. I didn't get a read about it.
It was 35 weeks on the New York Times bestsellers list.
You kidding?
Nope.
Wow. Man.
This is Carl's newspaper report. DANNION hasn't seen it since 1975.
Why were you feeling bad about showing me this? I think this is wonderful.
Well, because it says that you only died for a few minutes, and it was your wife who revived you before you went in the ambulance.
I can answer that easy. Well, here's the story. She was pounding on my chest when I was floating above. And this was probably 10 to 12 minutes into me floating around. And when she pounded on my chest, she brought me back. And all of a sudden I was back into that burning body. And then I was back out of it again.
DANNION maintains that he did wake up in the morgue after having a vivid near-death experience, and the reason why he didn't tell Carl or Dr. Eaves is because he was young and embarrassed about admitting such an emotional thing.
I was not going to start ranting and raving about a near-death experience in that hospital, fighting for my life. And I just don't understand why you were so upset about it.
Well, I sort of felt that it contradicted your...
No, it doesn't
story.
at all. I mean, it doesn't at all. You don't tell people the whole world.
We'll never know exactly what happened to DANNION when he died, but I do think he makes death seem too exciting. And I wonder if George should be more dispassionate about the afterlife, given the nature of his job.
That which is emptiness form, the same is true of feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness, Shariputra.
Today, George and his partner Thomas are driving to Baltimore to help Pam commit suicide. This is the Buddhist chant, the Heart Sutra. It's what Pam has said she wants George to recite at the moment of her death.
The main thing at the end is I want to hear the Heart Sutra read.
Okay. Oh, I got the Heart Sutra. Yeah, I can do the Heart
I
Sutra.
got that. I got it.
Now I've spent a few years with George, I'm beginning to wonder if he's too in love with death and was too one-sided when he counselled Pam.
The one thing I can say is that from the reading that I have done of people who have ended their lives intentionally, there is no record of anything bad happening to any of them. There's just no record of it. So I tend to think that the people I've helped are safe. If they weren't going to be safe, I wouldn't be sitting here.
It's a 6-hour drive to Baltimore and night-time when they finally arrive and call Pam to tell her they've made it and to make sure she's alone in the house and still on for killing herself.
Hello, this is George calling. How are you? Okay, great. I'm always careful and I always work quietly, like the Lone Ranger. I do so generally at night, and the deaths are, for the most part, it appears like she just died in her sleep.
Thomas is with me. We'll see you then.
So will you prop a newspaper up on somebody's lap, or will you do...
Oh, I shouldn't say this, but this is a very common. I mean, in bed they may be reading like this, or sitting in a chair, and I put a book or a magazine in their hand, and it just looks like they were there and expired.
Okay? Great. Sure. Bye-bye. Well, I got the instructions again, but it's a little unnerving with all of this traffic. I could just barely hear her.
How did she sound?
Very chipper. Very chipper.
There was a time when George would always take a large helium-filled inflatable alligator with him to his exits. He'd carry it under his arm in case the police stopped him.
And I could always say I was there to do a party, a pastoral party for, this person who was ill.
Because of the helium, because you had helium with you.
Right, because there would be helium there, right. So that would be the excuse. And I felt conspicuous walking. I thought, part of the thing is I want to not be noticed when I go in. But
you don't want a big stuffed alligator.
But if I'm carrying this stuffed alligator, people are going to notice it. So I thought it was just drawing attention to myself, and I started leaving the alligator at home.
And of course, the people that you're assisting don't really want you to turn up with a big stuffed alligator.
No, I don't think they really did either, So then they'd have to explain it to them. Why do you have this big stuffed alligator? Well, it's just in case someone... It just wasn't a good idea.
I'm going to turn around the car so that when we leave, it can be an unpretentious getaway. Guess we're just going to do our best. I wouldn't want you to come any farther than this. If it's all right.
An hour later, and George and Thomas suddenly dash out of Pam's house in a great panic.
She just dropped this bomb. First, she wasn't falling asleep, and she said something about, and then she starts eating food. You know, just pretending like she has all day and all night. And then she dropped this bomb about this woman coming home at 11:30. And I said, well, listen, I can't be here. I'm sorry.
Is she alive or dead?
Oh, she's alive. She's sitting and eating a bagel with cream cheese.
We regroup at a motel down the road.
This was not a successful event. We began chanting the Heart Sutra, which we did for about half an hour, and she got up and she said she wanted to have a bagel, and so she got up and went in and proceeded to toast a bagel for herself and put cream cheese on it, and then sat there munching very slowly on the bagel, and then proceeded to tell us that this woman who lives in the same house with her was expected to return, might return about 11:30. Well, it was then 11:15. And she's still munching on the bagel. I said, look, I can't stay here. I cannot stay. So I will call you at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which is the time that this roommate again goes back to work. Because I will not leave until I'm finished here, but I simply can't stay here and run the risk of all of this audience coming in.
It sounds like she's changed her mind.
No, she was very much decided, very much decided. It wasn't a matter of being undecided at all. I was thinking, there was one other time that this happened. I was in Pittsburgh, and a woman didn't follow my instructions. She was sitting around eating stuff in some kind of crazy way, too, I remember. And at one point, somebody came into her house, and I had to hide in the basement. It was horrible. I was scared to death. And so I just didn't want to repeat that circumstance here at all. So that's what happened. She had enough pills to sleep soundly, but not enough pills to zap her.
George says he returned the following weekend, drove the 6 hours again, and successfully helped Pam commit suicide. An obituary on a website for sufferers of chronic fatigue syndrome confirms that on October the 26th, 2003, the same weekend George told us he returned, Pam Aker died at her home in Baltimore, aged 59. A few months pass. I hear that George's problems are ratcheting up. His congregation have asked him to resign. They've got a new pastor now.
There are members of this congregation who were disappointed in him, who strongly disagreed with what he was doing. Our denomination has come out in support of the right to die. However, George does not work with a board of advisors, with medical advisors, and I have a concern about that.
George says he's always been against advisors because they just get in the way and slow things down. He says he did once have a board of directors, but they were all clients and now they're all dead. They sound to me like a bit of a one-sided board. George says he's lost everything because of the Irish case, his congregation and all his money, but not his theology. He says the Bible clearly never condemns suicide.
I talked to an Episcopal clergyman in Charleston who was writing an article on Jesus intentionally letting himself go by turning himself into the court in Jerusalem. So, you know, but people who say it's in the Bible and it's condemned in the Bible don't have a leg to stand on.
Is this true? It turns out that one of America's leading theologians, America's best theologian, according to Time magazine, works just a few hours' drive away from George in Durham, North Carolina.
So what about that thing George says about, you know, there's an argument that Jesus committed suicide?
It's absolute
bullshit. The martyr can never seek martyrdom.
Stanley says, of course, the Bible's anti-suicide, but when I ask him for passages that spell this out, he admits there aren't any.
The commandment, you shall not kill, means you cannot use your hand against yourself, is the way the rabbis always interpreted that.
And that's it. There's nothing else anti-suicide. I think George has won this theological argument. But then Stanley happens to mention something else.
Does he wear a collar?
Yeah.
He wears a collar. Amazing.
Why is that amazing?
Because Unitarians don't believe in priesthood. I mean, why should you wear a collar?
You don't think he wears a collar in a kind of, it's all right to commit suicide what I'm about?
Yes, it's generalized expertise that I'm a compassionate guy, and therefore I draw on the authority of the priesthood, though I no longer believe in it, because he believes each person has a direct relationship with God, which doesn't need the mediumship of a priest. So why should he wear a collar? And I think, quite frankly, it's a lie, and he ought not to do it. I think it's seduction, and that it should not be done.
I had no idea until you said that Unitarians don't usually wear dog collars.
No. I don't care how nice he is.
Did I say that I thought he was nice?
No. No.
Because I do, actually. And
I'm sure.
I'm slightly...
I have the feeling that I'm sure. I mean, these people are nice. Which only goes to show you how niceness is not a very interesting moral description.
The expert opinions are piling up against George. I'm still holding out hope that this man I've grown to like a lot is in control of himself and is only helping people he ought to help. And then, one day, a tape arrives.
I know it's bitter. Just keep drinking. Put your finger over your nose if you have to, and get it all down.
It's 4 years after I began filming George Exoo, a church minister who helps non-terminally ill people commit suicide, and a tape arrives. George says he's helped somebody to die over the phone, and he's taped it. All he says about her is that she's called Shirley, and she's in a motel room somewhere in Arizona, and she's got a bottle of the same poison George has in his fridge. George calls this particular poison the Rolls-Royce of suicide methods.
Hey, Shirley. This is George. I guess the hour has come that we've been planning. I just wanted to check to make certain that you are still firm in your intention. Well, I know you're nervous. I know this is, you've not done this before, but that's all right. We're going to get through it all right. So it's time to drink the liquids, and we start with the potion, which is bitter and horrible tasting. So it's important that you chug-a-lug it right down. I know it's bitter. Just keep drinking. Put your finger over your nose if you have to, and get it all down. Oh, good. You finished it. All right. Breathe in. Breathe out. Gate, gate. Para gate. Gate, gate. Para sorrow gate. Gate. I think I heard the phone drop, which would mean she is probably now gone. And that's it. That's the way it's done. That simply. That quickly.
can't work out if the tape shows George to be caring or predatory, so I decide to show the footage to an expert. Richard Badcock was the only criminal psychologist ever to meet and assess Harold Shipman. He's based at the Rampton Special Hospital in Nottinghamshire. He watches some of our early tapes and diagnoses George as being someone who's become too seduced by the specialness of his calling.
It takes your attention away from real issues which make you feel weak as a human being and vulnerable, and replaces them with a sort of pseudo-sense of being somebody special, doing a special thing.
I think it's the reason I'm placed on this planet, and I hope that
I think George is drifting into a state of amorality. I think he's lost his moral compass.
I will not leave until I'm finished here, but I simply can't stay here and run the risk of all of this audience coming in.
I think he likes that feeling of control.
But that makes it sound like he's got some psychological difficulties.
Well, he has. I mean, he is in psychological difficulty because he's not just staring into the abyss. He's in serious danger of falling into it.
So far, I've only shown him some of the early tapes at the Seattle meeting and the night George helped Pam.
I wouldn't want you to come any farther than this.
But then, when I show him this one, his opinion hardens.
I know it's bitter. Just keep drinking. Your finger over your nose if you have to, and get it all down.
I don't think he can stop himself from what he's doing. I don't think he's got any control over what he's doing. I think he's come to rely on it to keep himself going. So I think it's become such an important part of his identity that he can't give it up. He feels more alive at these moments. The quality that shines out there is almost an orgasmic experience. So I think there is something about the actual live quality of the experience of being in touch with somebody who's dying which is important to him. He's had his orgasm. He's going on to the next one.
It's May 2007 and George's partner Thomas says he's developed ME. He says he's now too sick to come along to the suicides, and so George has had to find and groom a new assistant to carry on the business in case he goes to jail or kills himself. Her name is Susan, and she says she doesn't want her face shown. Yeah. George will be turning up at Susan's house at any moment, and while we wait, she tells me the story of how she met George.
I was bitten by a poisonous spider in 1993. I was so sick that I wanted to die. It was so painful. I literally wanted to die.
What was the type of spider?
A brown recluse spider.
Are they around here?
Uh-huh. Oh, they're all over the place.
Really? Are people bitten by them a lot?
All the time, yeah.
And do people have such a similar physical reaction to the one you had?
No, they don't. I called the Hemlock Society. They wouldn't help me.
Because you weren't terminally ill?
Yeah, they rejected me.
Susan says it was the established Right to Die lobbying group, the Hemlock Society, it's now called Compassion and Choices, that suggested she contact George.
They just said, give this guy a call.
Kind of like under the counter?
Yeah, kind of like under the counter.
I met Susan Wilson, George's friend, and she wanted to kill herself because she'd been bitten by a spider, and she said it was someone from the Hemlock Society who said you might want to call George.
Oh, I think it's highly likely. Yeah. There was a time when I thought he was operating ethically ethically, according to our ethics, and I used to pass cases to him.
Susan says she'd have killed herself with George's help, but she couldn't find anyone to look after her python.
So when he met you, he was perfectly prepared to help you?
Yes.
He didn't try and talk you out of it?
No, I talked him out of doing the job.
What do you mean by that? What did you say to him? What did he say?
I said, I can't bear to leave these animals that are very difficult to care for.
And what did he say to that?
And he said, okay, I'm not going to push you. When you're ready, you'll be ready.
Susan says she and George got talking. They decided that if she wasn't going to be his client, she should be his assistant. As time will tell, Susan will turn out to be George's very worst possible choice of assistant.
Hello.
How do you do?
Hi, George.
Hi.
How do you do? Well, how long ago did you get here?
About half an hour
George
ago.
has a second job now. He's buying up houses that have been seized by the banks. Then he sells them on, although he hasn't managed to sell any yet.
So you can provide like the whole service, George. You can get them a house, and then when the banks foreclose, you can help them kill themselves.
George is not in a good way. His unsuccessful real estate business has put him heavily into debt.
By the way, George, I was talking to a theologian, and he just happened to mention to me that Unitarians don't wear dog collars. But you wear a dog collar.
Oh, they do. You know, I think most don't, but it tends to make people more comfortable. And what I found was, over the years, people wanted me to wear the collar. Don't believe things that theologians tell you. Theologians tell you. My goodness. Anybody can wear a collar who wants to wear a collar.
Even me.
Yeah, even you, if you wish. I remember one time I was entering a senior citizen's home. And I was trying to get in the front door, which was locked, as they often are. And this lovely lady came, and she opened the door with her key and said, "Well, if you can't trust a priest, who can you trust?" So there you go.
So you're down in the dumps, George?
Am I down in the dumps?
Hmm.
What do you mean, am I down in the dumps?
Down in the dumps, so sort of a bit depressed.
Because why? Why am I down in the dumps?
Well, you know, because you said that the real estate hasn't paid off, and you've got, you know, the international police after you.
But I don't want to discuss all that stuff on camera. All right. What time are we going to have any lunch, friends? I want to ask the question.
Susan had said that her multiple chemical sensitivities are so severe she can only eat in one restaurant where the atmosphere happens to not set off her symptoms. But then we end up eating in a different restaurant and she's fine. After lunch we head back to the house.
In the Arizona tape,
yes,
you were very much in control. You said, she said it's bitter. And you said, well, put your finger over your nose and drink it down.
Yeah, absolutely, because I'd been through that argument with her before. You know, she was using all that. She's used all that stuff before. You know, if you really want to end your life, and it's bitter, you'll drink it, because you know that that's the last thing you'll ever have to drink. You do it, and you don't complain about it or use it as an excuse for not drinking it. That's what I was. She had kind of used that before. Oh, it's bitter. Well, yes, it's bitter.
She tasted it before?
Yeah, she tasted it.
What, have you been there?
I had been there with her twice, yes. So
in person?
Yes.
And she tasted a bit and said it was bitter and
yes.
She didn't want to taste it?
Yeah, right. So that becomes one of the excuses why not to do it. What kind of bull twaddle is that? You know, if you're really serious about it, you're going to do it. She's got the Rolls Royce there, right there in her hand, the stuff that people around the world would you know, give their eye teeth for. She's got it in her hand, and she's still whining about it. So now, what, do you want me to cry? Should I cry for you?
No, I don't. I was struck by the word kind of whining. I mean, this is somebody who's not knowing whether to kill themselves or not.
But you see, because I've been through this thing with them already, and you know, I hear that excuse. If she really wants to do it, then let's just do it. That's all you have to do. That's all you have to do is drink it. Drink me. 3 or 4 swallows, and it's all down, and you're going to go to sleep permanently. In 10 minutes, you'll be off this planet. Praise the Lord. All right, now I gotta go bye-bye.
George has to do some real estate business. He says he'll be back in a few hours.
He's holding it in, I can tell, by that grin on his face. He's getting ready to have a tantrum.
And how does it manifest itself?
I can act one out for you if you'd like.
Really?
Sure, I'll do a little acting.
My God, I have answered this question enough. I'm not going to answer this anymore. I am not going to answer that question anymore. I can't take any more of this. Get out. Stop it. Just shut up.
Susan has always said that her spider bite symptoms have left her severely exhausted and disabled, and so it's a big surprise to see her bounce around the room.
That is the real George Exoo. He is giving you his best dog and pony show, but that is the real George Exoo. Food from me, and I put it back.
I think it reflects badly on George. Susan's exactly the sort of person he helps kill themselves, and I don't think she's as sick as she says she is. And then she says something extraordinary. She says she set up her own solo suicide business and will help practically anyone if the price is right.
He doesn't know that I've been other places doing this. He thinks I haven't done it on my own yet. I see this as a business. He sees it as a calling. There's a big difference in operations. With me, it's a business. No cash, no help.
Susan says her price is $7,000. I'm beginning to see her as a monster of George's creation. She says she's about to do a solo job in New Zealand, a job no other Right to Die group would touch.
We're the people of last resort.
Isn't that dangerous, though? I mean, you're bound to get it wrong, aren't you?
Probably at some point, yeah.
She says George's worst crime is his financial imprudence, that he'll help people who can't afford to pay.
George gets to a point, and it's going to come soon, where he'll run out of money. He won't scale down the expensive cuts of meats every night. He would rather kill himself than economize.
I've always thought he seems quite keen on killing himself.
I think he will do it soon. I really do. And that's why I've been pressing him to give me a list of his current clients.
Susan says that although money is her main interest, she will walk away from a client if they seem too mentally ill.
You're going to have to trust me on this one. You can really tell when somebody is terribly, terribly sick and ready to die, or if they're mentally ill and you just don't want to mess with them. And I'm better at that than George is. I really am.
I can't understand why George would want Susan as an assistant. She doesn't offer the love and support of a partner like Thomas did. Instead, she seems like a mercenary who's happy to sell George down the river. With Susan, George seems to be venturing into a darker place. It's almost evening, and I've been putting off asking George the hardest question of all, but I can't prevaricate anymore. I tell him I showed the footage to a criminal psychologist.
This forensic psychologist said he thinks you should stop. He thinks that you're out of your depth and it's a slippery slope and that you should stop.
And so what's the slippery slope I'm on?
Not being able to stop helping people because you see it as your calling. And you like to be there at the moment of death because you get something out of being there.
You know, psychologists have all these great theories. This sounds like a Freudian, you know, and he's got some kind of notion, some theory he's bringing to bear. And it generally is some kind of negative evaluation of the person. I don't know where this is all coming from.
Well, he says that you enjoy being there at the moment of somebody's death sexually.
No, bullshit. I think that's a sick statement.
This is how this is.
I'm sorry, but that's the answer I would give. I think that's a sick statement. Absolutely not. Was I playing with myself while I was doing this? I mean, geez, where would he even say that? Okay.
Oh, well, I think I can answer that question.
Okay, answer that.
Okay. He says that when you're chanting, it's like a sexual act, and then as soon as the phone drops down, your demeanour changes instantly, and it's like post-orgasm.
I think that this man is not familiar with chanting. Does he do any meditation practice himself?
I don't know.
I think he doesn't understand that stuff at all.
What if you're in the middle of helping somebody and you're on a roll and it's all happening and you've flown all the way there and it's your calling and you know, for the 5th time they've said, oh, I've changed my mind, I don't want to go ahead with it. Do you immediately stop and say, okay?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
you don't sometimes say, oh, go on.
No, no, no.
I do worry, George, that because you're helping people who are very vulnerable and in such a grey area, and because it's the most important thing that you do to you, and because there's no framework, because you're out doing this as the Lone Ranger, you may, if somebody's on the fence, be encouraging them.
It just hasn't happened. It just hasn't happened. Otherwise, these people wouldn't be hanging on for years and years and years. I think with the woman who was on the tape, yes, I probably was pressing her to some extent, but, you know, I was pressing her to make up her mind one way or another, because I can't go flying across the country week after week and have nothing come of it. I want her to either go on and live her life or to check out. But it's her choice, it's not mine.
A few weeks pass, and then I get an early morning call from Susan. She says the FBI just came and arrested George. Thomas woke up to find George and 2 men standing there. They said, we're putting George in prison until we can take him to Ireland. George didn't have the time to run into the kitchen and drink the poison.
Dearest Thomas, I love you so much and just can't bear the thought of snuggling next to you, Winky, and our pussycats. But you know, this may never happen ever again.
Thomas has been coming regularly, and every time he comes, I start crying. What does cause concern is the utter indignity with which we are treated by the guards. I can see that Martin Luther King, Mandela, and Gandhi, not to forget Kevorkian, have their larger impact because of their imprisonments.
Susan emails to say that now George is in prison, she's taken over the business and has already helped someone die for money in New Zealand. I can't work out if she's telling the truth or fantasizing. I asked Derek Humphrey if he knows anything about the New Zealand case, and he says that unwittingly he was a party to it.
This woman in New Zealand put a message on my news list. She very much agreed with how somebody else had taken their life and wished somebody would help her too, because she was suffering. Sue Wilson came to me and said, can I have the name and address of this woman on your list? And I said no. I said, could you tell me something about yourself? I you know, not known you before now. And she wrote back, and a rambling letter, but in that letter she said, I will go anywhere to help people, provided the expenses are there and the price is right. That, to me, Sue Wilson was Alf. I don't wish to speak to her. Anybody who operates like that is, I don't want to be tainted by any association with them. That's not the way to do it. But apparently she found this woman in New Zealand, and I heard it, that well, she'd gone out there, obviously the expense, and must have got a fee, I suppose, and the woman is dead and gone.
I wonder if Susan can prove to me that she's actually been to New Zealand, so I pay her one last visit.
She had some sort of breathing disorder, and the doctors there would not give her the medication that she needed. And I happen to take the same medication that she needs. I gave her a little bit of mine. She was fine.
But you helped her commit suicide anyway, even though you helped her breathe better.
Yeah, isn't it ironic But because I can't be there all the time giving her my medicine, I need it for me.
Didn't you think that maybe if there was a way to help her breathe better, then she wouldn't need to commit suicide?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But you helped her anyway?
She had no choice. She couldn't get the medicine.
She couldn't pick it up in New Zealand?
She couldn't. She didn't have any idea where to get it on the street.
Could you've got it over the internet if you gave her the name of the medicine?
I did, and she tried, and she had no luck.
Well, she could have got the medicine somehow. You know, if this medicine made her feel better straight away, she could have got it somehow. How much did she pay you?
That I won't tell you.
Susan says she considers her fee to be risk management because she smuggled poison past the New Zealand airport customs. You really did go to New Zealand, didn't you?
Yes, I did. It sounds horrible, but...
I've got to tell you, the money... Well, the whole thing, but, you know, the icing on the cake is the money aspect. You know, it sounds pretty sick to me. I think you shouldn't do it. It sounds very, very wrong.
I don't disagree with you.
But you're still doing it.
Somebody's got to pay the bills so you can have some water in that glass you're drinking.
How many people have you done?
I don't want to answer that question.
I mean, sort of more or less than 10?
Less than 10.
More or less than 5?
Less than 10.
Well, I really think you shouldn't do it. Derek Humphrey says that the New Zealand woman Susan helped was called Audrey Wallace, and later the New Zealand government confirms that an Audrey Wallace was found dead in her home in August 2007, the same month Susan says she was there. I'd promised Susan that I'd disguise her identity in this film before I knew she was going around the world helping people die for money. On October the 25th, 2007, a federal judge in Charleston, West Virginia, announces that he's made a decision about George's extradition to Ireland. George is free.
Would anybody like jail food here? I'm prepared to offer you a bologna sandwich, 2 cookies, an orange, which we don't normally get, and some orange drink.
The judge has decreed that because assisted suicide is not a crime in 25 of the 50 states, he can't allow the Irish prosecutor to try George in Dublin.
There were a lot of young hoodlums and drug dealers, and they weren't nice at all.
What did they do?
They started assaulting me with paperback books. This barrage of paperback books came at me, and one hit me in the left eye. If I had not been wearing glasses, I'm certain I'd be blind in that eye. Some of them perceived me as being gay. I'd done nothing to merit that whatsoever, but I was just different. The one who I would say was probably the ringleader of throwing the books took a great delight in pulling people's pants down and then accusing them of being gay. Well, you know, who's doing the pulling the pants down here? Where's the problem?
George says he thinks he's in the clear now and that the Irish prosecutor won't try and go after him again, although he admits he does have a problem left in his life. Susan. Susan says, for George it's a calling, for me it's a business.
That's not my philosophy at all.
And, I know it's not, but it is hers.
And for that reason, I don't really feel comfortable talking about this. During the time that I have been in jail, she has gone to other places. Now, again, this raises questions, because she has always said, oh, I can't travel on an airline unless I'm there on the 49th day, which is the day before they apparently defumigate planes every 50 days. She's got to be there on the last day before the plane gets something or other.
Well, that's nutty talk, George. I'm sorry, but it is.
But then she flies to, you know, she flies to New Zealand.
And it wasn't the 49th day.
In Australia. I don't know what day it was, but she didn't seem to be too concerned about what day she flew. So.
But you'd help her kill herself if she wants to. You've said that.
She is the one who decides, and she is not deciding that. So.
But you put two and two together. She'll only fly on the 49th day, but then she seems to fly on other days. You say she's not, you know...
Of course, some things don't match.
I think Susan is living proof that people like Susan shouldn't be helped.
Well, you know, she hasn't been, that's all I can say.
Would you still help her if she asked you to?
Sure.
I thought there wouldn't be any more twists and turns in this story about the messy, assisted suicide underground. But just before I leave, George offers one more.
You know, I provided you with a tape. That was not a real death thing. I was talking to a dial tone.
Just keep drinking. Put your finger over your nose if you have to, and get it all down.
If it seemed like it was a little harsh and rushed, it probably was because I was talking to a dial tone. All right.
Is that true?
Yes, this is true.
Shirley, I think I heard the phone drop, which would mean she is probably now gone.
George, I'm quite shocked.
Are you really?
You're a very good actor.
Well, I just didn't know what to do. You know, I wanted to give you an example of how I would work with somebody and the kinds of things I would do religiously, you know, and she was the only possibility.
This, George says, is Shirley from Arizona, except her name wasn't really Shirley, it was Karen, and she didn't really die on the end of the phone in that tape that day. She killed herself months later without George's help.
As it so happens, this woman finally succeeded on the 29th of October. She's dead now.
The Kingman, Arizona police later confirm that a Karen Stern was found dead of helium poisoning in a local motel room on October the 29th, 2007. I know George isn't a fantasist. He really did help Pam and Rosemary. He says he's helped 102 people in all. So why would he want to fake that tape? And there's something else strange. Richard Badcock, one of Britain's leading criminal psychologists, said the tape clearly demonstrates George deriving sexual pleasure from helping people die.
He's had his orgasm. He's going on to the next one.
I wonder how he'll feel when he realises he was basing his confident evaluation on a fake.
You know, I provided you with a tape. That was not a real death thing. I was talking to a dial tone. If it seemed like it was a little harsh and rushed, it probably was because I was talking to a dial tone. All right.
Is that true?
Yes, this is true.
Well, I suppose the two things that strike me are firstly, for somebody whose whole approach trades on their integrity in this difficult situation, he's remarkably casual about disclosing the, not just the breaking of the integrity, but the complete absence of integrity in what he said before.
You said that it showed him to be sexually aroused, but if he faked it, then does that still hold up?
Oh yes, yes. I wouldn't change that part of the comment. I think it makes him feel good all over, as it were.
Even though he was talking to a dial tone.
Yeah. It's because there's an element of fantasy in this. I mean, it doesn't matter who you're talking to, really. It's it's the activity that generates its own satisfaction, as it were.
I think George was stupid to fake that tape. I think someone who helps people decide whether or not to kill themselves shouldn't play weird games like that. Looking back, I think I gave Susan a harder time than I gave George, probably because I always liked him. But he seems hopelessly in love with death, with his calling. I wonder how much less corrupting the love of a calling is than the love of money.
You are going to have a great adventure. Look forward to it.
I think the things I liked most about George when I first met him, his libertarian, spiritual, maverick qualities, have turned out to be the things I now find most worrying about him.